Hi, I'm Jessie. I'm a cannabis nurse and the founder of Marijuana Mommy, and you're watching Patients Are the Proof, where we talk about the real benefits of cannabis. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Mary Clifton. Dr. Clifton is an internal medicine doctor in New York City with 20 years of experience in both the hospital and private practice. She's licensed by the New York State Department of Health to provide medical marijuana and is a recognized expert in cannabis therapeutics. She's a published researcher, national speaker on women's health and osteoporosis, and author of 4 books, and 2 new, soon-to-be-released books on CBD and cannabis. Dr. Mary Clifton, hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about your practice and how you became involved in cannabis.
Well, I do telemedicine practice almost exclusively at this point, and a lot of consulting within the cannabis community. My work is, to help people get cannabis cards and also to do consultations so people can know, what kind of products to look for when they get to the dispensary. And then I shoot educational videos. I have 100 free videos on my site at cbdandcannabisinfo.com, and then I shoot videos specific to the work that you're doing in your community for various organizations.
Fantastic. And how did you become a cannabis expert? Because so many, practicing physicians aren't really aware. So many healthcare professionals in general aren't aware of the power of the plant and aren't aware of the developments in cannabis therapeutics. How did you become involved in it?
Well, I wasn't particularly aware myself. I've been practicing for almost 25 years now. And I did, a fair number of cannabis cards in my primary practice and advised people, but mostly listened to what people were telling me was working for them. And I wasn't really sure about exactly the value of the product, I was very busy as an internal medicine doctor with a lot of specialization in women's health and osteoporosis, and not necessarily thinking about redirecting. And then I had 2 very important deaths: my brother, who died of colon cancer, and a good girlfriend who died of ovarian cancer.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Oh, I know. About 4 months apart. And these were both people that I loved very much and that I ended up doing bedside hospice on. I've done hospice for 25 years, but I've always done it over the telephone with a nurse managing all of the hard work at the bedside. Or I've popped into the hospital and seen the patient for 5 minutes or 6 or 8 minutes or 20 minutes once a day. And then the nurses have still been really the bedrock of the care. So this was me at bedside, and I got to see, a lot of uncontrolled symptoms without cannabis and a really pleasant, very smooth experience on the other end with cannabis.
Beautiful.
So I thought this all is probably just a one-time experience. It's coincidence. None of this is actually real none of this can't be real. So I thought I'll do a little research and then I'll get back to my day job. And that was about 3 years ago.
Not back to your day job yet, huh?
No, I haven't gone back. There's so much great data on cannabis. Everybody always says, oh, there's no research, but there's loads of research. So it's my job to bring that data to people and make it easy to understand why the product might be valuable for you and your various conditions.
That's excellent, and a great point with the research. I just had an interview about that in my last episode. That a lot of doctors here in the United States think there is no research, and the truth is there's just no U.S.-based research, but there is so much outside. It's amazing.
The U.S.-based research has been hard to get. I mean, there's been limitations in getting an adequate product to even start doing the work on. And then once the product is available, the prohibition really limits. It's a little bit Alice in Wonderland. It limits our ability to be able to set up great protocols. And then the product that's available to study in the U.S. is something that people aren't even using anymore. We can only get it from one source. And oftentimes by the time it's delivered, it's overly dried or moldy. There's been a ton of problems with completing high quality research here in the US. So I think that's changing. But in the meantime, we can get great data from Israel. There's great data coming out of Italy and a lot of good Canadian studies. Some of my favorite work is coming out of Canada.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank goodness for these other countries that are doing the work for the information that we need. I love your videos. They're
Oh,
short
thank
and
you.
so helpful, and really target like specific issues that people can utilize cannabis for. And I watched one in particular that just fascinates me because I
Mm,
don't know a lot about it, but ADD and ADHD, the
yes.
use of cannabis. A lot of people are starting to explore that more. Can you speak to that a little bit?
ADHD is very interesting surrounding the cannabis use. We don't have any direct research, but a group of Duke researchers did a very smart study on chat rooms. They looked at chat rooms on the internet in all kinds of platforms and looked at people who were talking about ADHD and what they were saying around cannabis and ADHD. And they found that, they found, I think, and studied 258 different chat rooms that were communicating within the chat room about cannabis. And people reported nice benefits to their symptoms of ADHD with taking cannabis. They reported that they were able to sit still for longer and they felt that they could concentrate longer.
Mm.
And the studies actually would support that in that cannabis operates in the same parts of the brain when you do a functional MRI or a PET scan. The scans that light up your brain in various areas based on how your brain is responding. When you do a PET scan, it definitely shows that cannabis behaves in the movement areas in the back of the brain, in the cerebellum, in a similar way that methylphenidate or Adderall does.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
a lot of what we're doing with these ADHD kids and adults, because it doesn't necessarily, you don't really necessarily grow out of it. But a lot of the problem is that it's very hard to sit still and do your work. So once somebody can just sit still, oftentimes that will help to relieve quite a bit of the attention deficit if you can just resolve the hyperactivity. And that may be where we're seeing the results with using cannabis in these settings.
That's amazing. It's remarkable how many different areas, and how many different issues it can impact. Have you seen anything about, maybe the dosing that people are using? Is this more like, I know like the research out of Israel for autism shows us that often patients respond best to like high CBD or low THC, more THC than hemp. But have you seen anything like that with ADHD, or are we not there yet?
I don't think we really have specific dosing recommendations, but I think most of your considerations are right on track. And, a lot of people respond to a higher CBD with a low THC, unless you're working in weight loss or loss of appetite or nausea. All of those seem to be very centrally mediated, and the high THC content seems to be superior in helping some of those symptoms that you see with end-stage cancer or sometimes in end-stage HIV, although that's less of an issue nowadays with the antiretrovirals. But managing chronic nausea, managing chronic loss of appetite is more of a central issue, and that's more THC. But I agree, the rest of it is oftentimes responds very well to CBD.
Yeah, I have had a few people reach out and tell me that just CBD alone is very helpful for their, ADD or ADHD issues. So that it is interesting. It'll be fascinating to see what sort of research comes out of this.
It's so individualized, the response, and in part that's because of the CB1 and CB2 receptor distribution. There's physiologic reasons why you have CB1 or CB2 receptors in various locations, but there's also the number is genetically determined. So doing this process, having them, the amount of CB1 and CB2 receptors is to some degree determined by your genetics. And there's also the FAAH, the fatty acid amine hydrolase levels that are very much genetically dependent. So
Mhm.
some people may
Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
The FAAH is the enzyme that breaks down the THC or CBD. So some people may report that they have an onset of action when they take the medicine of a few minutes, but then it peters off after a few hours, where somebody else may take the same dose of a medicine and watch it peter off over 6 or 8 hours. And that's because of the amount and the level of activity of the FAAH in individual persons' metabolisms. So it's hard to come up with a standard dose and a standard dosage recommendation. I can say pretty reliably that you're going to have to give yourself 2 weeks of trying different doses, seeing how they work for you, trying some different products before you say that this doesn't work. It's not for everyone, but it's going to take most people 2 weeks and a couple of tries before they feel super confident on what they're doing.
And I've noticed a lot of times it can also, different cultivars can come into play as well. Like, patients will utilize one cultivar, it'll do very little for them, and they'll find something else, and that can be really, really impactful. So I'm always surprised that, well, not surprised, but I'm always, I hear so often, and you probably do from patients too, like, what do you mean I have to try different things and different doses? Like, what, just tell me which one to use that's going to make me better. And my response is always like, well, how many different pharmaceuticals did you try? Because I tried tons of different pharmaceuticals, and I know many of them didn't work for me. And it's kind of the same with cannabis. There are different types, and you got to figure out what works for you, because like you said, it's so genetically determined, and it really, really varies from patient to patient.
Well, that's very true. And really, by any measurement, Motrin, Advil, Aleve, all of those products are basically the same molecule. They should all work the same way. But I'll have patients tell me over and over again that they prefer Aleve to Motrin. I really don't understand why you would. I don't understand why you would. The molecules are so similar. They're really, we used to call them another non-steroidal anti-inflammatory when they were first coming into market, like all the Daypro and Relafin, all of that too. Very, very similar molecules, and their claims to fame were so weak. It was just another one joining an already crowded field. But we're also trying to standardize this product that in reality is a plant, and even from one side of the greenhouse to the other, the exact same monoculture across the greenhouse, the exact same soil, all of the same conditions applied. You're going to have different levels of THC and CBD on plant A on one end and plant B on the other end. They're individual plants. Yeah. And
terpene production can vary a lot too.
Absolutely. So I'll have people who are doing a home grow, and they'll test their home grow and say, look at these tests. They're so vastly different. I mean, these laboratories are all screwed up. Well, no, I don't think it's the lab.
Yes. It is such a common misconception that people think if they're going to get their seeds with their genetics and they're going to get their exact product that they want, and it doesn't always work out like that, because grow conditions can impact so much of the chemobar of the plant. It really makes a big difference.
100%, just very subtle changes in hydration and in sun exposure, light exposure, and you can see major differences in your plants. So yeah, you just have to take a step back on that and try to honor the results and realize that we're dealing with a natural product here, and we want to. Because you want to have some variability and have a plant that is responding to the situation around it and that is going to adjust the terpenes. I always wonder if there isn't just some natural adjustment seasonally for what you need that you don't even realize you need. Like, even on our earth, if you eat seasonally, you would be eating a lot of fresh, green, light leaves. The leaves get darker and thicker and greener when you're getting into collards and kale that can live and still grow this time of year. And the fall is just loaded with orange, right? With all of the squashes and everything. So there is apparently a need for more beta carotene and its other constituents this time of year that I don't think anyone really understands.
I don't think so either.
But it's hard to find something orange in May and June to eat.
It is, yeah. That's a good point. That's a very good point.
So,
fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I think sometimes if we allow the natural world to guide us, we're going to get a lot farther than if we keep trying to inflict a very severe control around it.
I so completely agree. And that's one of the things I worry about with cannabis. Like if it's taken over by, our big pharmaceutical companies and our large corporations that are going to just turn it into this mass, tightly controlled product. So hopefully that doesn't happen.
Well, I think there's probably going to be positions for some very high quality distillations where if you're dealing with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, for example, I think there's some exciting research coming in around that where,
Really?
where we can maybe distill down different concentrations of more of the lesser known cannabinoids like
Yes.
CBN or
Yep.
CBG
Right.
and then concentrate those and find a very, very potent anti-inflammatory product. Because a lot of these poor patients are going to biologics right now that are doing a wallop on their immune system.
Heart-wrenching. It's a
Is.
devastating treatment for a devastating condition. It's really, really hard, the whole, such a
Yeah.
tough, my sister has Crohn's disease, such a challenging condition.
It hits everybody close to the heart. It
It
certainly
does.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody knows somebody who's just not doing well under those circumstances,
So many, I know, because there are so few options with it.
Yeah. I think finding some great options. I'm really hopeful that we're going to get some great options coming out of cannabinoid distillations in those settings. And so, we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. You know what? I love that you are able to offer telehealth in New York. So maybe tell us a little bit about how it works over there, because in New Jersey, patients are not allowed to use telehealth to acquire their cards. And you mentioned hospice. I'm a former hospice nurse. That's my background too. And patients can't get
Yes,
out of their homes. They're
I know.
bedbound, and it's a huge limitation here. So I love that a few states do offer it, and New York is one of them.
There's only a few states in the country that do. I think New York, Vermont, Iowa. There's a few states that
California.
do, and I think I think I think that more will come online as time passes. But the card production is fairly simple and very easy. You can just be in contact. We'll have a conversation. I create a card and generate a PDF, and then you have everything that you need to go to the dispensary. There's a little bit of work you have to do with the state of New York, but otherwise, you should. It's not difficult to get a card, and consultations I think should not be expensive either. So I have very reasonably priced consultations that allow
Great.
people to do like more of an urgent care consultation and make a decision on how things should work for them. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And how can people book a session with you?
Oh, well, you can just reach out. I appreciate you sharing that. You can connect with me through cbdandcannabisinfo.com. I also have drmaryjanemd.com. So
Cool.
DR.
Like it.
I love it.
That's great.
drmaryjanemd.com.
Nice.
And
Cool.
that's where I have the cards and the consultations. Yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
a
And
great
I'll
little
put
site.
I'll put those down in the comments as well so that
Oh,
people can click them. But I
thank you. Sure.
really, really appreciate your time. I think that's a great place to wrap up. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, we did a nice job covering everything. I do want to tell you that I reached out to the researchers that did the chat room information on ADHD.
Oh, yeah.
They were Duke-based researchers, and asked them if I could do a webinar with them. And they remain very staunchly anti-cannabis. And
Really?
I said after your review, it would be really hard, I think, to remain anti-cancer. This may be a nice alternative for your patients, but you know what? They're Duke. And Duke is big tobacco, and big tobacco is not big
Yeah.
cannabis.
And it's what they're the Southeast Coast. So we know you're
Yeah.
on the East Coast. We're lacking and we're a little behind over here, especially
North,
further south.
yeah, North Carolina may be one of the last pegs to fall.
I
They're
know.
pretty resistant. So,
Yeah.
but you guys just need to keep up the hard work. There are so many big industries that are trying to prevent. I mean, alcohol, of course, pharmaceuticals. So, whatever you can do to keep driving it forward.
Keep contacting those elected officials, everybody at home, keep contacting them. It's the only way
Yeah.
to get that movement.
Well, thank you so much for
Oh,
having me.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you soon.
Thanks.